I was just an ordinary disaster walking through school, tripping over nothing, surviving on embarrassment alone. Until one moment under a ginkgo tree changed everything. She wasn't just kind, she was calm in a way that made my chaos feel safe. And somewhere between piano notes, stolen glances, and a single folded note, I fell into something I never saw coming: love. If you've ever stumbled into someone who turned your whole world upside down, stay till the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. I used to think my life would drift along in the safest, dullest way possible. Like those plain bakery buns, people grab only because they're cheap, never because they actually want them. Nothing memorable, nothing dramatic, just there. But the universe clearly had other plans, and it chose to announce them in the loudest, most humiliating way imaginable. It happened one morning when I managed to outdo every embarrassing moment I'd ever had. Not just a small slip or awkward stumble. No, this was the kind of disaster that feels scripted. Like fate took a pen and wrote it in bold, decorative calligraphy just to make sure no one would miss it. That was the exact moment my face ended up pressed against the thighs of a girl I had never seen before. Soft, warm, mortifying. The kind of memory that doesn't fade, it just replays at 3 a.m., forever. It all started with me running across the courtyard of Cherry Street High, clutching what remained of a rice ball that was rapidly disintegrating in my hand. I had overslept again, courtesy of a terrible decision to binge a 20-episode drama about immortal sword maidens. I had promised myself I'd watch just one more episode, which is easily one of humanity's most convincing lies. By the time I realized my mistake, I was already late and sprinting like my academic future depended on it. Somewhere along the way, the rice ball gave up on life entirely. It burst apart mid-run, scattering grains behind me like I was leaving a trail for invisible pigeons. That alone should have been enough humiliation for one morning, but apparently the universe prefers excess. My shoelace came undone at the worst possible moment. I stepped on it, let out a sound no dignified human should ever make, and lost all control of my body. I went forward with the elegance of a collapsing scarecrow, fully prepared to meet the hard, unforgiving ground, except I didn't hit concrete. I landed on something soft, warm. Alive, there was even a small, startled sound beneath me. When I opened my eyes, reality greeted me in the worst, and somehow most surreal, way possible. I was sprawled across the lap of a girl with glossy black hair, delicate glasses, and an expression so calm it felt almost unreal. She looked like the kind of person who wakes up at sunrise to meditate and drinks tea in perfect silence. Meanwhile, I had just crash-landed into her existence like a natural disaster. She looked down at me without panic, without annoyance, just a quiet composure that somehow made everything more embarrassing. "Are you comfortable?" she asked. No one has ever recovered gracefully from a moment like that, and I certainly didn't. I shot upright so fast it felt like my soul lagged behind. Words abandoned me completely. Apologies tangled with nonsense until I sounded like I was malfunctioning. She simply tilted her head, watching me with mild amusement, as if I were an interesting but harmless creature she'd just discovered. Not irritated, not shocked. That somehow made it worse. She stood, brushing off her skirt, then reached out and offered me her hand. Her voice was soft, almost gentle enough to dissolve the chaos around me. "Are you hurt?" Her hand was warm and steady when I took it, the exact opposite of my trembling fingers. I managed to introduce myself, though my dignity felt like it had shattered beyond repair. She smiled. An actual smile, not polite or distant, but warm enough to leave small dimples at the corners of her mouth. "Dignity is overrated," she said. For a brief, irrational moment, that felt like a life-altering statement, I tried to respond, but whatever came out barely resembled language. She noticed the tragic remains of my breakfast scattered across the ground and, without hesitation, pulled out a neatly wrapped bun from her bag and handed it to me. "You look like you skipped breakfast." I stared at her, trying to process the situation. Beautiful, composed, mysteriously prepared with emergency food. She felt less like a normal student and more like something out of a story. An angel, maybe. Or some wandering figure with hidden wisdom and an unlimited supply of baked goods. I accepted the bun with both hands like it was something sacred. She explained it simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Taking care of yourself matters, and sometimes that includes taking care of other people too. That kind of quiet kindness hit harder than anything else that morning. We ended up walking toward the school building together. She moved with calm, effortless grace, while I trailed beside her like chaos given human form. probably still radiating the energy of someone who had just survived a personal disaster. People stared as we passed, though it was impossible to tell whether their attention was drawn to her quiet beauty or my complete lack of composure. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more overwhelming, she casually mentioned that if I kept skipping breakfast, I'd probably faint someday, and that she could start bringing extra food. My heart reacted like something fragile collapsing under too much weight. I tried to respond normally. I failed completely. Words tripped over each other while my hands moved in useless, panicked gestures. She laughed softly, and that sound alone felt dangerous. The kind that lingers, the kind that stays with you long after it's gone. At the classroom door, she pointed out that my shoelace was still untied. Before I could fix it myself, she crouched down and tied it with calm, careful movements, her fingers briefly brushing my ankle. It was such a small gesture, but it carried an unsettling kind of weight. Then she stood as if nothing unusual had happened at all, and simply said she'd see me later. And just like that, she walked away. I stayed there for a moment, leaning against the doorframe, trying to steady the storm inside my chest. Somewhere between the embarrassment and the quiet warmth she left behind, something had shifted. That was the day everything changed. The day I understood that my life wasn't going to stay ordinary. And the day I met someone who could unravel me in the gentlest, most dangerous way possible. Unfortunately, fate wasn't done with me yet. The next morning, I walked into school with a firm, determined goal: to behave like a normal, functional human being for once. No falling, no chaos, no accidental collisions with strangers. For about 5 minutes, it almost worked. The moment I saw May sitting beneath the old ginkgo tree, everything I had carefully assembled to resemble normal behavior collapsed instantly. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and settled into her hair, turning the entire scene into something unreal, like she had quietly stepped out of a shrine painting and decided to exist among ordinary people for a while. Any trace of composure I had brought with me that morning vanished without a trace. I told myself to act natural. Just walk past. Don't look. Don't stare. Be a functioning human being for once. My brain, of course, chose chaos. I tripped over absolutely nothing. No stone, no crack, no hidden obstacle. Just empty air and my own inability to exist with dignity. The fall came fast, dramatic, and entirely predictable at this point. For a brief second, it felt like my soul detached itself in advance, unwilling to be associated with what was about to happen. But before I could complete another catastrophic meeting with the ground, something stopped me, a firm tug. My backpack strap caught in someone's hand, May. She hadn't even looked up from her book. "Morning, Lynn," she said calmly, turning a page with one hand while effortlessly preventing my second public downfall with the other. As if multitasking between reading and saving lives was just part of her daily routine. There was no convincing explanation left. She was not normal. She couldn't be. She felt like some quiet, mythical presence placed in my life purely to test the limits of my sanity. I straightened up, coughing awkwardly, trying to pretend that everything had gone exactly as planned. Something about warm-ups, gravity practice, a highly advanced routine no one else would understand. The words came out tangled and useless, but I committed to them anyway. She finally looked at me over the rim of her glasses, her gaze calm, curious, and faintly amused. "Do you always start your day like this?" I lifted my chin with misplaced confidence, as if I had any control over my existence at all. "Only on weekdays." A pause. "Today is Tuesday." Exactly. The logic made perfect sense to me and absolutely no one else. She closed her book gently, slipped it into her bag, and stood up with that same quiet elegance that made everything she did feel intentional, effortless. Then she told me to come along. She had brought extra buns again. That familiar mix of gratitude and embarrassment hit all at once. I tried to refuse out of principle, out of pride, out of whatever fragile pieces of dignity I had left. She didn't argue. She simply looked at me in a way that made denial feel pointless, like she already knew the outcome. I accepted the bun, and just like that, the quiet routine between us continued. Simple, unspoken, and far more meaningful than it should have been. Walking to class beside her had apparently become a spectacle. Whispers followed us like background noise. People wondered why someone like May would spend time with someone like me, as if the pairing itself required explanation. Some assumed there had to be a reason, a trade, something hidden behind it. There wasn't. I could barely afford extra pencil lead, let alone whatever mysterious currency they imagined I was using. May didn't react to any of it. She moved through the attention like it didn't exist, like none of it held any weight. At one point, she glanced at me and told me to ignore them. I shrugged it off with practiced ease. Shame had already burned itself out of me after too many public disasters. She laughed softly at that, the sound light and dangerously pleasant, the kind that made it hard to focus on anything else. "You're honest," she said. "I like that." The words landed harder than anything else that day. "I like that." It echoed, repeated, settled somewhere deeper than it should have. My reaction was immediate and completely undignified. Breathing became optional for a second. Thinking stopped entirely. In class, she sat right behind me. Close enough to matter. Close enough to make every small movement feel amplified. The teacher droned on about quadratic equations with all the energy of damp fabric, and my focus drifted dangerously toward sleep. Then something tapped lightly against my back. A folded note appeared at the edge of my desk. My pulse spiked instantly. The situation felt absurdly dramatic for something so small. Passing notes during class like it was some forbidden act. I unfolded it carefully, already aware of who it was from. "Try not to fall asleep. If you do, I'll poke your cheek." Everything inside me short-circuited. I turned slightly, catching a glimpse of her calmly writing as if she hadn't just issued a very specific and very personal threat. I scribbled a response with unsteady hands, challenging it out of reflex more than confidence. The reply came back almost immediately. "I would, and I will." That was enough. Sea leaf disappeared as a possibility. I sat upright for the rest of the lesson like someone under strict surveillance, fully aware that any sign of weakness would be met with consequences. After class, she leaned in closer than necessary, her voice quiet but deliberate. "You stayed awake." The distance between us felt smaller than it should have been. My response came out strained but honest. "Fear works." Her smile held something knowing, something unreadable. "I'll remember that." There was intent behind it, a quiet suggestion of something more, something not yet revealed. It left a lingering sense of anticipation I couldn't shake. The rest of the day followed the same pattern, her calm, composed presence against my ongoing internal collapse. By the time school ended, I felt completely drained, like I had survived something far more exhausting than classes. I was halfway out the gate when I heard my name. She caught up to me effortlessly, stepping into place beside me like she had been there all along. That same calm expression, that same quiet gravity. She asked if I was free the next day. The question caught me off guard. My answer came out uncertain, scattered, shaped by habit more than thought. My life wasn't exactly structured enough to guarantee anything. She didn't dwell on it. She simply said she wanted to show me something and told me where to meet her. Under the ginkgo tree after class. Then she left. No hesitation, no explanation. Just a small wave and a quiet departure, as if she hadn't just shifted something fundamental in my world. I stood there long after she was gone, holding on to that single word, something. It echoed louder the more I thought about it. My mind filled in the gaps on its own, building possibilities out of nothing. Each one more impossible than the last. Whatever it was, it didn't feel small. And for reasons I couldn't explain, it felt like the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. My mind refused to stay still after that. Every possibility rushed in at once, each more overwhelming than the last. Maybe she was going to confess something. Maybe she would just hand me another bun with that same quiet kindness. Maybe she would calmly reveal she wasn't even human at all, that she had stepped out of something celestial and, for reasons beyond logic, had chosen me. None of it felt impossible anymore. None of it felt safe either. Whatever it was, I wasn't ready. The next day dragged itself forward with unbearable weight. It felt like my chest had been filled with restless wings, every breath uneven, every second stretched too long. I couldn't sit still. My pencil tapped against my notebook in a frantic rhythm until even the girl beside me looked ready to snap. At one point, the teacher stopped mid-lecture and stared directly at me, concern creeping into his voice. I answered with complete sincerity, admitting that whatever wasn't physical. It was something far worse, something internal and impossible to control. He chose not to pursue it further. The final bell hadn't even fully finished ringing before I was already moving. I left my seat with the kind of urgency that didn't care about dignity or appearances. By the time I reached the courtyard, my pace had turned into something between a run and a stumble, like I was being chased by something invisible. I tried to slow down before reaching the ginkgo tree, tried to look composed, but there was no saving it. She was already there. May sat quietly beneath the tree, hands resting in her lap, completely at ease. The sunlight filtered around her again, soft and steady, like the world had decided to arrange itself just for her. There was no rush in her, no tension, nothing out of place. Standing there in front of her felt like stepping into a different kind of time. She noticed me immediately, a small smile forming as if my chaotic arrival had been expected. "You're early." I tried to correct that lie, but it barely held together. The truth was written all over me, in the uneven breaths, in the faint trace of panic I hadn't managed to hide. She stood, closing the distance between us without hesitation, and reached up to fix my collar. "You rushed." Her fingers moved gently, adjusting the fabric with quiet precision. I froze completely. The world narrowed down to that single moment, her hand, the warmth of it, the closeness I wasn't prepared for. My thoughts scattered in every direction at once, leaving behind nothing useful. When she finished, her hand lingered just a second longer than necessary. "There. Better." Whatever sound escaped me in response barely qualified as human. I forced myself to speak, to ground the moment before it swallowed me whole. I asked what she had wanted to show me, though even that felt fragile coming out. She didn't answer directly. She simply turned and told me to follow. I did, without hesitation, trailing behind her with a kind of quiet obedience I didn't even recognize in myself. The hallways were nearly empty, the noise of the day fading into something distant. She led me to a door I had never paid attention to before. The old music room, the one people avoided, the one rumored to be forgotten or worse. She opened it without pause. Inside, there was no darkness, no eerie presence waiting, just warmth. The late afternoon light spilled across the room, catching in the dust that drifted lazily through the air. At the center stood a piano, polished and still, like it had been waiting. She stepped inside as if it belonged to her. "I come here sometimes," she said, her voice softer in the quiet space. The thought slipped out of me before I could stop it, a reflex shaped by everything I was. "And I'm interrupting that." She looked back at me, her expression gentle, steady. "You're not." That simple reassurance landed harder than anything else she could have said. It settled somewhere deep, quieting something I hadn't realized was always tense. She sat at the piano bench and motioned for me to join her. I hesitated for a moment, fully aware that being this close to her felt dangerous in ways I couldn't explain. Still, I sat down. The space between us disappeared instantly. Our shoulders brushed, light but impossible to ignore. I stayed perfectly still, as if any movement might make everything collapse. She asked if I could play. My answer came out honest and self-deprecating, the only defense I had left. She laughed softly, and the sound carried through the room like something warm and alive. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. The music that followed wasn't loud or complex. It didn't demand attention. It invited it. Soft notes, gentle and steady, unfolding like something familiar even though I had never heard it before. It felt warm, calm, quietly comforting in a way that didn't need explanation. It felt like her. Without realizing it, I had been staring. Not just at her hands, but at the way she existed in that moment, focused, at ease, completely herself. When the music stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. She turned slightly toward me. "You're staring." I stumbled over my response, trying to reshape it into something less revealing, something less obvious. It didn't work. The words that came out were clumsy, but real. Something about her hands, about how they seemed meant for this, like the piano was just an extension of her. It was the best I could manage. She studied me for a moment, her gaze calm but touched with something warmer, something quietly amused. "You're cute when you panic." The statement landed without warning, sharp and impossible to deflect. Everything inside me reacted at once. Heat rising, thoughts collapsing, composure disappearing entirely. There was no recovery from something like that. She didn't explain it. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into the piano bench and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Her movements slowed slightly, just enough to make the moment feel different, more deliberate. "I wrote this yesterday." Her voice softened, carrying something more careful, more uncertain beneath it. "I wasn't sure if I should give it to you." My pulse surged instantly. Every instinct told me this mattered, that whatever was written there held more weight than it should. She handed it to me, her fingers brushing mine in the process. I unfolded it slowly. The words were simple. No decoration, no complexity, nothing to hide behind. "You make my days more fun." For a second, nothing made sense. My mind stalled, refusing to process something so direct, so unexpected. I read it again and again. Each time it felt more real, The only response I could manage came out scattered, shaped by disbelief more than anything else. I pointed out the obvious. That I was a mess, that my existence leaned more toward disaster than anything remotely pleasant. She didn't argue. She just answered quietly and honestly. "You make me laugh." There was no hesitation in it, no exaggeration, just truth. And no one else really does. The weight of that settled in slowly, deeper than I was ready for. My ears burned, my thoughts unraveled, and for once there was nothing chaotic about the feeling, just something warm, unfamiliar, and impossible to ignore. My face must have been burning so badly it could have lit up the entire hallway. I could barely stand still under her gaze. The question slipped out of her so gently, it almost didn't feel real, as if she were simply stating something obvious about the weather. She said she liked being around me, not because of anything impressive or meaningful, because I felt real. "Warm," she added softly. Just warm. That word lingered too long in the air. Warm, like it had weight, like it meant something I wasn't prepared to understand. My brain stopped functioning properly after that. Thinking became optional. Breathing became questionable. Before I could recover, her voice lowered slightly. There was something else, she admitted. Something she wanted to tell me later, but not yet. Not now. Not before she was ready. Her gaze dropped to her hands, like the words themselves were too heavy to hold. I nodded without hesitation, even though my mind was already spiraling in every possible direction. It didn't matter. I would wait. She stood after a moment, smoothing her skirt as if resetting herself back into calmness. Then she suggested we go home together. The walk back felt different, quieter. Like the world had stepped slightly away from us, leaving only the sound of our footsteps and the lingering echo of what had just been said behind in the music room. That room no longer felt like just a place anymore. It felt like something sealed away carefully, something private between us. I still didn't understand what she was hiding. I still didn't understand why she had chosen me, but I could feel it now, clearly and unmistakably. Something in her was reaching toward me, hesitant but real. And without knowing when it started, I was already reaching back. The days that followed didn't settle anything. If anything, they made everything worse in the best possible way. May stayed close. Not casually close, deliberately close. She waited for me in the mornings like it was natural, sat beside me during breaks like it was expected, and always had something extra for me without ever making it feel like charity. A bun, a quiet gesture, a small act of care that never asked for attention. Every smile she gave me felt like something opening inside my chest, bright, overwhelming, completely destabilizing. And I became a disaster in response. Pens vanished from my hands. My feet forgot how to coordinate with the ground. I walked into objects that had been stationary for years. My body became unreliable in every possible way. She witnessed all of it without judgment. Just that faint, amused calm in her eyes, like I had become a familiar kind of chaos she had already accepted. But beneath her quiet gentleness, something else existed. Something softer, something uncertain. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her gaze would linger on me longer than necessary. Not playful, not amused, something quieter, almost fragile. And the moment I turned toward her, it would vanish, replaced instantly with calm indifference, as if she had been looking at nothing at all. I never managed to ask about it. Every time I tried, the words tangled before they could escape me. By Friday, something in the air had changed. I was packing my bag in a way that could only be described as structurally questionable when she approached. Her voice was steady, but it carried a softness that made everything inside me tighten. She asked if we could go to the music room again. The request alone sent my thoughts spiraling. That room already held too much meaning. Too many unspoken things. Especially after the note she had given me there before, still folded carefully in my pocket, like it mattered more than it should. I agreed immediately, pretending calmness I did not possess. The hallway on the way there felt unusually quiet. Every step echoed softly, like even the building was listening. She didn't speak, and that silence pressed in around us, heavy but not uncomfortable. More like anticipation. When she opened the music room door, warm light poured across the floor. Dust floated lazily in the air, glowing faintly in the afternoon sun. The piano stood in the center like it had been waiting for something it couldn't name. She closed the door behind us and remained still for a moment. My name came from her lips quietly, carefully, like she was testing how it sounded in this space. She admitted there had been something on her mind for a long time. Something she should have said earlier. The words made my heartbeat climb into my throat, loud enough that I was sure she could hear it. She didn't sit. She rested her fingers lightly on the piano, eyes lowered, as if grounding herself before continuing. She struggled with speaking about feelings. Afraid of saying too much. Afraid of saying it wrong. I answered without thinking, trying to ease whatever tension she was carrying, saying I wasn't exactly good at anything either, so maybe it balanced out. A small laugh escaped her. Quiet. Nervous. Real in a way I had never heard from her before. When she finally turned toward me, her voice was softer than ever. Everything felt different when I was around her, she said. Brighter. Lighter. I made her laugh even when she didn't intend to. And I made her feel something she struggled to name at first. Warm. Safe. The words landed between us with careful precision. She stepped closer, but still hesitated, as if standing at the edge of something she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. Her hands trembled slightly despite her calm expression. She admitted she had been afraid. Afraid I would find her strange. Afraid I would pull away if I knew the truth. I asked what truth she meant, barely able to keep my voice steady. Then she finally looked up. Her eyes carried something unguarded, something that didn't belong to the composed version of her I was used to seeing. Something vulnerable enough to shake everything I thought I understood. She said it plainly. She liked me. Not casually, not as a friend. Something deeper than what she had planned for herself. The world didn't respond properly after that. Everything tilted. My thoughts stopped forming. My body forgot its instructions entirely. Even the air felt confused. Somewhere far away, life continued normally. But I was no longer part of it. I tried to speak. What came out instead was an incoherent sound of pure malfunction. Her expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across her face. She thought she had made a mistake. That snapped something back into place. The words finally broke free. Loud, messy, completely unfiltered. I liked her too. Not in any controlled or reasonable way. In a way that made me lose balance, lose focus, lose every normal function I was supposed to have. She wasn't just someone I liked. She was someone who rewired my entire existence without permission. Silence followed. Then she laughed, not gently this time. Fully. Brightly. The kind of laughter that filled the room and erased everything heavy that came before it. Relief softened everything between us. She called me impossible, still laughing, wiping the corner of her eye. I covered my face, wishing for immediate disappearance. She didn't let me stay hidden. She pulled my hands away gently, insisting she wanted to see me. Her fingers found mine. Held them without hesitation, then she stepped closer. Too close for comfort. Too close to pretend nothing was happening. Her breath brushed against the space between us as she asked softly if she could. The question didn't need explanation. I nodded. Everything slowed after that. She moved toward me carefully, giving space for hesitation that never came. I moved forward too. Without thinking, without stopping, the kiss was soft, quiet. Almost uncertain at first, like a question answered without words. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, gentle and real. When it ended, neither of us moved away immediately. Her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing in the same quiet rhythm under the fading light. She whispered that she was glad I fell into her life that day. I responded without thinking, still half dazed, saying something embarrassingly honest about how glad I was that she had been there to catch me. She laughed again. And in that moment, something settled between us completely. Afterward, we sat at the piano together, shoulder to shoulder, letting random notes fill the room without meaning or structure. It didn't matter. It sounded right anyway. Her hand stayed in mine the entire time. The sun lowered slowly outside, and the room grew softer, quieter, as if the world itself was letting the moment exist without interruption. Only then did I understand what had been unfolding all along. Something quiet. Something overwhelming. Something warm. Something I no longer had any desire to run from.